Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to aidsmapLIVE HIV and Aging Special. I'm thrilled to be joined by an absolutely phenomenal panel who have decades of experience between them, who are going to be joining me in a moment. But if you do have any questions, do please get them over on Facebook and Twitter. I've got someone behind the scenes looking out for your questions, and I will try to pose them to our panel. But let's get started. Let's meet our first person, Marc Thompson.
Hi, Jason.
Hello, Marc. So
Hello.
Marc is a lovely to have you on. Marc is a creative activist, health promotion specialist, podcaster, and LGBTQ plus cultural curator who's been at the forefront of HIV and activism and education since 1986. Were you a really small child when you started? An embryo. Marc is currently the co-director of Love Tank, a not-for-profit organisation working to promote the health and well-being of underserved communities through campaigning, education and research. Lovely to have you, Marc.
Be here.
Can we next have Maurice Greenham?
Hello.
Hello, Maurice. Maurice is a long-term HIV and LGBT activist with past careers in education and professional theatre. You're a proud octogenarian, is that right?
I am absolutely 82.
82, wonderful. And how will you be celebrating 40 years of surviving with HIV, Maurice?
I will be celebrating my 40th year as not only surviving but thriving with HIV with a solo trip to Colombia in South America.
That's very exciting. Just to say a few more things, among your many activities, you're co-founder and chair of the North Midlands LGBT Older People's Group, a member of THT Before 96 Group, a poster boy for NAM AIDSmap, so thank you for that, and a church organist.
Absolutely, yes. And I've got a funeral. I don't know. I'm waiting to play for tomorrow. Get it right.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you. See you in a moment. Next, can we have Joe Josh? Hello, Joe.
It's great to see you, Suze.
It's wonderful to have you here. So Joe has just flown in from where?
Washington, D.C., Washington Dulles, which I had never been to before. And if you think I'm not making any sense, it's because I'm all mixed up time-wise.
with very little sleep. But just to quickly you have so many different hats, but I'll just whiz through. Joe is a communications professional with a background in public relations, marketing and journalism. Following her shock diagnosis with HIV in 2008, Jo focused on the voluntary sector, becoming a member of an HIV network of more than 700 treatment activists, the UK Community Advisory Board, and in 2017 became communications officer for the British HIV Association, for whom you work on a freelance basis, and you do things for NAT, THT, so much stuff.
Just can't keep me down, can you?
Thank you so much, Joe. And next, can we have Giovanni?
Hi, Suze.
Hi, Giovanni. Wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So happy. It's first time here, and I'm very happy to chat with you and with all others.
Brilliant. So I'll just quickly whiz through your very impressive bio. Professor Giovanni Guaraldi is a full professor of infectious disease at University of Modena and Reggio, Emilia in Italy. Did I say that right?
Enough.
Thank you. Giovanni leads the Modena HIV Metabolic Clinic, which is a multidisciplinary people-centered clinic where 4,500 people living with HIV have been evaluated for comorbidities and frailty. Giovanni's published over 500 papers on a variety of clinical aspects of infectious diseases and is a panel member of the European AIDS Clinical Society guideline. So much. Wonderful to have you on.
My pleasure.
And finally, our final panelist, Juddy Otti.
Hello, Susan.
Hello, Judy. So Judy is someone who also has many hats. She's head of HIV services at Africa Advocacy Foundation and grows co-ordinator for the Sophia Forum. Judy has over 12 years of experience working in the HIV sector on different initiatives ranging from HIV prevention programs, providing support for people living with HIV around treatment and advocacy. And Judy is passionate about bringing the migrants community's issues to the forefront of the HIV agenda, as well as advocating for better understanding of issues affecting women with HIV as they age. So looking forward to hearing lots from you today, Judy.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to have me on your platform today.
Fantastic, thank you. So can we bring everyone on, please? Because we have already had an unprecedented amount of questions from people from around the world. So again, if anyone has any questions, do get them over. But I'll start off with you, Giovanni.
Yes.
Is the life expectancy for people with HIV different to the general population?
And so, Susan, actually, this question needed to be put in a context. And so, on one side, we can have an epidemiological view. And from an epidemiological view, we can say that people that reach good CD4 cell count may reach the same life expectancy of the general population. But still, we know that the gap between general life expectancy and life expectancy in people living with HIV really depends on how late you were diagnosed with HIV and how is your immune status. But from a clinical point of view, I don't believe that actually life expectancy is what people matters. What people matters is how they will be living with HIV. And we can realize that while in the past 20 years, the life expectancy of people has turned to be closer to the general population, with regard of the number of years that people expected to live without chronic condition, imagine comorbidity, healthy disability, has not changed in the past 20 years. And that there is a 15 years difference compared to the general population. And so a lot still need to be done.
Right, okay, thank you. And I would like to explore a little bit more about that later on in the conversation. But Marc, if I'd like to go over to you next, do you think that there's enough of a focus on quality of life when we talk about aging with HIV?
Thanks, Susan. I think that it's certainly shifting and increasing. I think that when we look at the 1990 targets, HIV activists, people living with HIV have been arguing for quite a while that quality of life measures are included in that, and that we are trying to achieve good quality of life for people living with HIV. So I think conversations like tonight are really important for kickstarting that conversation and making sure that we can look at what we need to be developing as a sector, as a movement, what we should be doing in clinical practice to ensure that quality of life is considered and included. And I think, as Giovanni said quite rightly, it's not always about how long we live, it's about what happens in those years that we have going forward. So I think that I'm really optimistic that this is a change because there are more of us who are living longer than ever before. So it's definitely time for us to start having that conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And, talking about people living longer, Maurice, as someone who has, reached their 80s, what does that actually mean to you as somebody living with HIV?
It feels great. I mean, I think it's important to celebrate the fact of reaching older age, because it's not a something which everybody manages to achieve. So I regard it as a privilege, and I'm really enjoying being 80. It's amazing what you can do as an 80-year-old. You couldn't do when you were younger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Joe, I mean, what does a good quality of life with HIV mean to you?
To me?
Well, like to Joe.
Oh, to Joe. Sorry. Yeah.
Don't worry, Maurice. I'll get you later. It's basically probably the same as it would be for anybody else as they get older. The great thing about getting older is you don't mess up so often, because you're just a little bit wiser. But apart from that, it's a social life. It's meeting people, doing things, seeing things, going to concerts, going to gigs, all of the things that make life worth living. And then there's always food. Speaking as someone who loves to cook and loves to eat as well, just being able to have what you want when you want it. I mean, that's a real joy. And going for a walk in the countryside, looking at the lakes, that sort of thing. That sounds really boring, probably, but I mean, it's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just thinking, for many of us, particularly who were diagnosed with HIV a while ago, we weren't expected to grow older with HIV. And I know for many older women with HIV, we're often told that, we're lucky to be alive. But Judy, I wanted to ask you, do you think that the narrative around, women being told that they should just be lucky, they should feel lucky to be alive, may mean that for some women, they may kind of like suffer in silence because, they feel that they shouldn't really speak up about some of these issues?
Thank you, Susan, for that. And I will draw my reflections on the gross research that we did and the conversations we had with a number of women, and rightly so. They said they were told they were lucky to be alive, they're lucky to be living well into their aging years. However, a lot of the women felt invisible. Their issues were not being addressed. For some women, because of the early diagnosis, there were decisions made at that time that are not necessarily decisions made now that we know more. For example, the opportunity to have children, relationships, and as a result of now living longer, they are missing out from those benefits, those friendships, those relationships and support networks, and therefore are very isolated. So I think it's key that we also look at this aspect of living longer for women.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very helpful. And Giovanni, what is actually regarded as healthy aging with HIV?
And so healthy aging is a definition that WHO provided for the general population, and actually relates to the capacity of each individual to be able to give value to life. I like so much this definition because it tells that everyone is different and everybody may give different value to each aspect of life. But actually, this is all what us would like for our future. We know that this capacity, it refers to a functional ability, that is our capacity of giving value really depends on two different aspects. On one side, there is ourself, all what is under our skin. We call this intrinsic capacity. It refers to our genetic, it refers to our lifestyle, And actually, it refers also to our comorbidities, and HIV is one of these, not the only one. Okay, but we know that this intrinsic capacity relates to the environment. And so the same intrinsic capacity in different environment may return a different functional ability. And so whenever we discuss, let us say, the way in which we age, our functional ability, it really depends on the interaction between ourselves, who we are, but also the environment. And so in order to promote it, we need to work both at a person level, but also at the environment level.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a very good point. And does that resonate with everyone else about the importance of the environment in which you're in terms of aging? What do people think?
Absolutely, I'll jump in on that one. And I'll go further than what Joe said. I mean, getting exercise, Joe said, and getting outside with nature, absolutely. But being creative as well, that's a really good strategy for successful aging in my book. So, and by creativity, I mean, really not just the arts, but play. Was it George Bernard Shaw who says, "You don't grow old because you stop playing. You no, you don't stop playing because you grow old. You grow old because you stop playing." That's it. Got it right. Got there in the end. Got there in the end. Yeah. So yes, and also nutrition, and we've said exercise, and also sleep. That's also something very, very important. That's one of the pillars.
Yeah, Giovanni, and then Joe.
Yes, very rapid. Just to say that with regard to intrinsic capacity, what we look for is really our capacity with regard of our capacity to move, our psychological issue, that is our mental health, that is our, let us say, capacity of interrelationship with people. That is our sensory capacity, how we see, how we listen, and our vitality. Vitality is the possibility to produce and spend energy. And so these 5 are the domains in which we are asked as doctors, but most of all as individuals, to try to cope with. But mind you, even if these 5 domains must interact with the environment, mind you, between the intrinsic capacity and the functional ability, that is the environment space, mind you, in people living with HIV, it may be different. First of all, because there is the aging stigma that makes this difference wider than the general population. And so there is HIV stigma, but let's also add that there is the stigma of getting old. And so there is a lot of prejudice, how we act, how we think of getting old. And so let me say, what was beautiful on what has been said so far is that getting old is really a privilege. This is what we need to keep in mind.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I'll say amen to that.
Yes. Oh, can't hear you, Joe.
Somebody muted me and it wasn't me. Can you hear me? Right. I was just going to say that I don't intend to get old. I have never intended to grow up, and I don't see why I should change that now. But it's also literally never too late, because one of the big things is sarcopenia, or basically losing your muscle strength because you don't do things. But even as I'm sure Maurice will back me up on, even as the oldest, you can increase your muscle strength. It isn't too late. We think of treatment as prevention. We should think of exercise as prevention. And as Susan, well, you all know, I do not exactly go to gyms. I've got neuropathy, but I can walk. And I make sure I do walk. I can also swim. And I have to be honest and say, I absolutely hate it. The water's cold and it's horrible. But it's really good, both for you mentally and for you physically. And literally, if you don't use it, you lose it as far as muscle strength is concerned. And then you get more and more miserable, more and more low, because you can't do things. It's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for a lot of people, people talk about the importance of exercise, but for many people, they can't actually afford to go to a gym or something like that. But like being out in nature, I think can be really good for emotional walking, things like that can be really great for emotional well-being. But I'd like to just move into a little bit about our environment. And for many people, the environment can be extraordinarily stressful. And Judy, do you think that the stress that many migrants living in the UK experience can impact on their health as they grow older?
Most definitely, Susan. I think navigating life in a country that is not your country of origin will always bring its challenges. And depending on whether you've come as a refugee, as an economic migrant, as a settling spouse, all those bring different challenges to the situation. I think the number of people we support with AAF are struggling with just navigating the healthcare system, let alone trying to survive in a different country. And a lot of this comes with trauma that people are carrying. So it's how that influences the whole environment that they are living in and how they're able to navigate that and thrive, which is a word Maurice used earlier. And I think it's something that we find, the skill to thrive is something that a lot of people are learning. And the idea that you have many more people aging now with HIV, I think is something we have to pull together to use as a positive to help build the navigating of this and create a stronghold for migrants.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And I think we can't really just look at HIV in isolation because, particularly for people from Black communities, we faced, disadvantage in healthcare for generations across disease areas. And Marc, thinking about often people from Black communities, when we go to the doctor, we're more likely not to be believed. And certainly for many Black elders, when they face this, not necessarily in relation to HIV, but in other illnesses, what impact do you think that has on people's health with the understandable lack of trust people may be feeling?
Thank you, Susan. I mean, I think, I'm really loving this conversation about environment as well, because, with the success of HIV treatment and U equals U, that becomes our marker. You're undetectable and that's it, get on and live your life. And there was some research done by the Voice newspaper recently, which surveyed over 10,000 people, Black people in the UK. And it was something like nearly 80 to 90% expected they would have poor treatment and substandard treatment in healthcare before they even got in the door. And that was based on past experience and family experience and the experience of peers. So I think the impact that has on us directly is that we are less likely to engage in healthcare. We are less likely to speak to clinicians. We are less likely to be honest and open about what is going on with us. So I think all of those barriers can really, really prevent us from engaging, which is a tragedy. And so I think that things that, have already been mentioned around how do we support people as they're getting older are really important. There's another point I just want to make really quickly, Susan, which is about the word intersectionality. And we hear it a lot, but we can't talk about aging and HIV unless we think about that. So as a relatively successful, comfortable gay man that's been living with HIV for a long time, I've got a nice flat, I've got a bit of money in the bank, I have a good social connections. I'm not overly worried about aging, but I do know there are lots of people who are my age and older that live in poverty, live in unsecure social housing. We already know there are higher rates of drug and alcohol and smoking amongst people living with HIV. So I think these are the factors which we need to tackle. And it goes back to Giovanni's point about environment. We can be as undetectable as we want, but if all those other things aren't fixed in our lives, then we won't have good quality of life. We won't look as fabulous as Maurice does at 80.
Thank you. You can come again.
Look at all those other issues as well.
Yeah, thank you, Marc. That's a really important point. And I think, you know, so many people living with HIV are living in poverty, and things are getting worse in the current environment. And it can be really challenging for people to think about, you know, things like taking their medication or looking after their health when they're struggling to keep a roof over their head, when they don't have enough food to eat, when they're worried about, you know, if they're going to be deported out of the country. And Giovanni, how do you help your patients who are facing so many other challenges that are indirectly impacting on their health?
So first of all, let me say it's so much important that any health system, and so I'm a part of a public health system, must work together with people living with HIV. And so the best thing I can do is really to empower my patient regarding how to live with HIV. And the first issue is we are not speaking about HIV disease. We are speaking about healthy living. And so this is a cultural change, Susan, because so many years we're speaking about HIV as a disease. Okay, now we are speaking about health of people living with HIV. And so we turn around the issue. Now I'm a health promoter. And in order to do so, I think that the first thing is my duty. My duty is have a good therapy that makes your viral load undetectable. But mind you, this is not the ultimate goal. It's just the starting point. The ultimate goal of treatment is healthy living. And this is for you, for me, for any diseases. And so the point is that now we recognize that the third 90, the undetectability, is the starting point to do something more, something different. This means, Susan, that we need to reshape the way in which care for people living with HIV is provided. So far, the way we provided care is to reach undetectability. If we recognize that this is the starting point, and we needed to guarantee functional ability, well, mind you, I can obtain functional ability even if I've got comorbidities, even if I've got HIV, but I've got also diabetes, I've got myocardial infarction, and so on and so forth. Even if I've got disability, I can obtain in a good environment the possibility to give value to life. Of course, the environment is important, because if I do not have food security, I do not have, let us say, a social system that support me. Imagine in a war situation, imagine in a migrant situation, all this will never be reached. But let me say, as a doctor, I'm here as a doctor. I think it's time to reshape the way in which we provide care. This is aging is teaching us something that will be for the benefit, mind you, not just for people living with HIV, but for the whole health system.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do the others think that care can be reshaped to improve the health and well-being of people with HIV as they grow older?
Susan, if I can come in, I think a lot has to be done around the conversation of aging as a woman. A lot has to be done around, we're now getting a bigger, larger cohort of women aging with HIV. And this has brought in new complications around drug interaction with hormonal treatment, for example, for those who are experiencing menopause, around other comorbidities and body shape and weight and all these other issues that are unique to women that we really have to address and focus on. Possibly there are opportunity for more in-depth research, meaningful research, accessing and addressing issues faced by women particularly. So I think there's still a lot we have to do around the experience, improving the experience of the aging experience of women, especially around comorbidities, around the menopause and around even things like end-of-life care, things like, I know we're talking about having, Marc has told us he has at least a little bit of money. But for those who don't have a little bit of money, what does retiring look like now? This is something, a conversation that wasn't had. So now that we're having these conversations where someone was not able to work, they've not had a pension, they don't have savings, they're in a foreign country, what exactly does this look like? And these are conversations I think we need to facilitate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking a little bit about the menopause, we know that women with HIV may experience the menopause a little bit earlier and may have worse symptoms. But the reality is, for many women living with HIV who are going through the menopause, are just ping-ponged around so much in the healthcare system. You're talking about symptoms to their GP, and then the GP says, oh, that must be HIV related. And then the HIV doctor says, oh, no, you need to go back to see your GP. And in terms of the work that we did with Grow's project, it was problems with the menopause was coming up so much for many people. And I think often when people think about the menopause, they think about like hot flushes and mood swings, but the reality is that there are so many other symptoms that just aren't considered, and women with HIV are less likely to be offered HRT, which can really help with symptoms of the menopause. And Jo, do you think that many doctors outside of HIV that we have to see don't really know enough about HIV to support women effectively?
Well, they're not going to, because they learned about HIV in the dark, olden days when treatment itself wasn't really very effective. They don't know to spot opportunistic infections, for example. They don't pick up conditions that would indicate people are living with HIV. And women are, as you know from the latest figures published on the 3rd of October, are late diagnosis are the people who are diagnosed because doctors don't think it's going to affect them, and women don't think it's going to affect them either. So there's a miscommunication. But going round to what Judy was saying earlier, we need a holistic approach. We don't need to be treating things like one thing at a time. We need to look at how people are living, how they are supported with housing, what else is going on in their life. And one of the things that may do that, if it ever actually gets introduced properly, is the patient-reported outcome measures, or PROMs, which will look at a whole person rather than this symptom or that symptom, which can be very ephemeral.
Absolutely. And a question has come in from the audience that I'd like to pose to you, Giovanni. Person says, I changed my medication recently and put on weight. Could my new medication be the cause?
Yes. So weight gain is something that troubles a lot, and actually may also have some metabolic consequences, because so far we know that there is a disease that it's per se disease, which is obesity. But even if I'm not obese and I gain weight, well, a weight gain more than 5% of my original weight may have an increased risk of metabolic condition, and in particular with regard of hypertension and diabetes. And so, yes, we know that some contemporary use drugs are associated with weight gain, but mind you, first of all, we need to understand that this is almost never the effect of drug per se, but is most of the time a multifactorial issue in which the drugs play some role, but lifestyle and genetic condition and aging and previous, let us say, immunological condition play the major. We must not be afraid of this issue. We must, as a doctor, inform people about this risk. This risk is different if I'm a naive person that starts antiretroviral therapy. In this situation, some gain of weight may even be beneficial because it may represent what we call return to health. Mind you, what I don't want is to gain fat in my belly, in my liver, in my visceral level, because this is associated with increased metabolic problem. We call it insulin resistance. But mind you, the issue is that the problem is there. We know that there is the problem. We know that not all the drugs have this issue, but we know how to prevent this situation. And the prevention now is based mainly on lifestyle. And so took the positive issue. Isn't this the occasion to promote lifestyle for healthy living? And so, mind you, my interpretation is that living with HIV on one side and aging on the other side implies a change in our lifestyle. While I get older, I need to improve my lifestyle. This is good for all. This is even more important in people living with HIV. So take the good part. I know it happens. I want to prevent. I can prevent with lifestyle changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a comment coming from Laswana Griffith, who says, if we actually use the tagline patient-centered care, the individual would get the help in terms of actually living well. But just talking about healthy lifestyle, we know that, you know, eating healthily is good for us, but also at the same time, healthy food can be expensive. And so many people living with HIV are living in poverty and they can't afford some of the diets. I mean, is that the experience that people are hearing in terms of people that they work with?
I mean, I don't work directly with as many positive people as I used to, but when I did peer support, it definitely was an issue. You know, poverty, social connections, belonging to community, not being able to work because of migration status, or not being able to work because of previous ill health, or just being out of work for a really long time, so you're out of the job market. So I think that those are definitely factors which persist, and as you age, those things get bigger and bigger, and it's more difficult. We live in an ageist society. Colleagues on the call have already spoken about the stigma of aging. I think one of the challenges that we have, Susan, because you know, part of your question was how do we improve care? And I think that all of us who are living with HIV over the past few years have experienced a shift away from our HIV clinicians. So I see my doctor twice a year, get my meds, and I'm out the door. And I think that happens for many, many people now, which is great. That's really, really successful for us. But it means I have to rely more on my general practitioner for stuff. Now, we know, particularly in the UK, that general practice is under immense pressure. So for me to get an appointment, or me to go in to get lifestyle advice, it's almost missing. I only go to if something's wrong. So in some ways, the fix that we need is what are we doing in community? How are we ensuring that there are services, there are organizations, there are activities that can enable people who are living with HIV, who are aging, to engage with community services at their doorstep, where they are. You know, so if I want to go to a walking group, do I have to be prescribed that? Or can I go to Positively UK or AAF, or can Sophia Forum do it? If I don't have enough food to eat, is there money available in small grants, or how are we supporting organisations like the food chain to ensure that people are eating well? And we know that because of austerity, that those organisations no longer have the funds to do it. So we're in this really bizarre mishmash of a place where we aspire to live really well, but the clinical services, the community practice, general practice, and the community services are all under so much pressure that it's just really difficult for us just to exist.
Absolutely, yeah, really important. And you know, you raise really important points about the significance of the support from the community and, you know, peer support. How important has that been to you, Maurice, as you age with HIV?
Well, I was going to pick up on that because from what Marc has just said, there's peer support in all kinds of areas. And one of the best peer supports locally is the Pensioners Convention. My goodness me, they can get off that. They really know about activism. They were marching outside the station saying, "We do not want our tickets offices closed." My goodness me, they were very successful. And the thing is, you see, when you get older, your issues are very often not to do at all with HIV. They're the same as everybody else's. So don't be afraid to extend your peer support to things like opening doors, for example, in London. And as I said, the Pensioners Convention. But if I can flag up the High Vitality, which is still going strong. You may remember it, some of you, as the National Long-Term Survivors Group, of which I was involved in for many, many years, and still am. And it is going strong. But it's now under the new catchy title of High Vitality. It sounds like a protein drink, doesn't it? But, or something like that. But the thing is, the point is that it's now available for anybody who's HIV positive. You don't have to be a long-term survivor. And they're still doing their residential weekends, and there's one coming up in December. So I'll just flag that out. Yeah. Okay, that's
brilliant. Thank you. And a question came earlier from Fungi from Forum Network. And I will ask you, Giovanni, does the duration of living with HIV play a biological part in aging?
And so, yes, we published several years ago the fact that with regard of the risk of comorbidities, it was not simply the fact that being older increased the risk. Most of the comorbidities, imagine, chronic kidney disease, liver disease, osteoporosis, cardiovascular, increase in the general population as soon as we get older. Okay, but actually we know that this increase is not just function of how I'm getting older anagraphically, but rather how I get older biologically. And in this, the numbers of years I live with HIV is a major factor. That is, 1 year lived with HIV increases the risk of comorbidities more than one chronological year. But mind you, Susan, this is something that merely refer to people that acquired HIV many years ago, in which, in fact, they've been living with HIV with a detectable viral load for many years before being treated, or rather they've been treated with a toxic drug that were contributors to comorbidities. And so nowadays, my clinical perception is that people that, let me say, got HIV after 2008, let me say this is the date where integrase inhibitors, where second generation of drugs were introduced, and started antiretroviral therapy immediately after diagnosis, are definitely much more closer to the general population with regard to the aging trajectories. And so, mind you, people living with HIV and that are at an older age are somehow half and half. Half of them are people that got older with HIV, and half of them got HIV at an older age. These were quite different with regard of the risk of comorbidities, with regard of risk of frailty. What I want to tell people is that nowadays the most important issue is be treated immediately and not live one single day with a detectable viral load. The drugs now are the easy part, because let me say all the drugs we have are definitely much, much better than what we had in the past. Still, there may be some side effects, still drugs may contribute to comorbidities, but nothing to do what has been the experience of Maurice, that, for instance, is the champion of his generation because of the fact that actually he was able to survive also initial drugs that were so difficult to be taken and so harmful also. So Maurice, congratulations, you are the best of your generation.
Oh, thank you for that. And I'd certainly endorse what the doctors just said, because I certainly benefited from the new drugs when of course, when I was first diagnosed, there was no drugs at all. There was no treatment whatsoever. And when AZT was first introduced, it was killing as many people as it was saving. So I avoided that like the plague. I mean, I was fortunate I was asymptomatic for 10 years. But then, of course, I was around when the new miracle drugs came about. But of course, they were so toxic. You know, and I was on all of the D drugs. And the D drugs, you know, peripheral neuropathy, lipodystrophy, lipoatrophy. I've had a lot, and I'm fortunate because I was able to take part in clinical trials for facial wasting. I mean, what you see now is the result of some very, very skillful work by.
You're looking absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. But I endorse what Dr. has just said. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've got another question that's come through. Giovanni, if you can answer quickly as well, are people with HIV more at risk of getting cancer?
Yes, and luckily, yes. And again, this cannot be generalizable. There are some immunological conditions that makes your cancer risk be higher. Actually, this may be to your immunological condition. The lower your CD4, the higher the risk is. Most of the HIV cancer are immunologically related. But second, there's also cancer that are related to lifestyle. Okay, and so imagine, for instance, the issue of cancer that are related to sexually transmitted diseases. First of all, anal cancer, and also but actually the point, and also the third is because most of the cancer are age related, and definitely still HIV produce an accelerated aging process. And so there's different reasons why this may happen. But again, move from epidemiology to personalized medicine, to precision medicine. The issue is that at an individual level, we know exactly how to prevent and how to screen for cancer. And so this is very, very much important. And let me say, my population, the people I take care, are better screened than the general population. So I needed to screen all women and men for pap smear. So still, there's lots of places in which pap smear for anal cancer in men is not obvious. But actually, anal cancer screening is mandatory. Okay. Still, there are some areas, like, for instance, lung cancer screening, that well, I don't know what to do. Actually, European guidelines of respirology says you've been smoking for more than 20 years. Now you are more than 50 years. Please screen for lung cancer. And so again, our guidelines, please refer to AAC's guidelines, are very detailed. Please make all people living with HIV have a pathway to know where it must be screened. We said about the anal cancer and the cervical cancer. We said about the lung cancer, the prostate cancer, the breast cancer. And so all this can be identified, and the liver cancer for people with hepatitis. And also remember that we've got vaccination to prevent cancer. This is so much important. So again, think what is the role, for instance, of HBV vaccination, of HPV vaccination. These are vaccines that are extremely powerful and avoid the occurrence of cancer. This is so much important to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely, and that links into a point that was raised to me earlier this afternoon by Florence, Chief Executive GMP Plus, who said to highlight the importance of things like cervical screening and the fact that older people living with HIV are having sex. So sexual health screening. Who knew? Things like that need to be highlighted. And do you think that there is enough of a conversation around sexual pleasure for older people with HIV? Would anyone like to take that?
Yeah. There was a quote. There's just been the 14th International Workshop on HIV and Aging in Washington. I actually was there for a research meeting, but I picked up stuff from it. And this is from a woman there. I'm 62 years old and I still have sex. Not all the time, but when I want it.
Good for her.
Yay!
Yeah.
I mean, I think, Susan, just on that point, I think that, let's broaden this out a bit, because clearly this is a conversation about people with HIV and aging, but generally in society, we don't have that conversation about older people having sex. It's taboo. People go, ugh. And, that kind of reaction. I think that's where the challenge needs to definitely happen. But then we're thinking about people with HIV. When we go to clinic or wherever, we should still be being offered sexual health screens. We should still be being talked about you equals you, and if we want to use condoms and all of these sorts of things. Because again, good sex, if we want it, well, actually, no, good sex and intimacy, I think those are two things we should be talking about here, are really important for our well-being and for quality of life. And we talk about exercise. Well, sex is exercise, right? So
Absolutely. And that does tie in a bit in terms of like stigma and older people around having sex, but just generally in terms of being older and HIV and stigma. And someone asked me to ask you all around the stigma that we face in healthcare settings. What can be done to educate healthcare professionals so they don't stigmatize against older people with HIV?
Well, I have to say one thing is to talk to them. If you get an opportunity, just grab it. And for instance, I was asked to as the chair of the LGBT older people group to talk to paramedics in training in their third year, and which I did, and I literally went it down extremely well. But it's and if you get a chance to talk to doctors in a forum or whatever, just grab it and do it. Be proactive.
Giovanni. Judy and then Giovanni.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to jump in and say, I think it's including the health professionals in these conversations. Many times we have these conversations among ourselves. I think it's time that we include the conversations, we widen this conversation, broaden it, so that we include other stakeholders. And around the stigma very quickly, again, for a lot of the experiences we're hearing is the stigma plays a huge role in intimacy, and a lot of people are going without intimacy because of the stigma, because of past experiences they've had around disclosing, and they now, you know, prefer not to go into any relationship just because of those experiences. So again, these conversations and widening them, broadening them, so that you know, women or men don't think they have to find partners within the same circles. But if there is a U equals U messages is wider, then you don't have to find somebody living with HIV to have a relationship with. And I think having those broader conversations would really help.
Absolutely. Thank you. Giovanni.
I just wanted to say a couple of things very quickly. And so first of all, it is important that we recognize that in order to fight this, we need an intergenerational dialogue. Because mind you, I'm an older physician that all my career was with people living with HIV, but it's not obvious to me when I have to train my junior doctor to make them understand what has been this incredible experience of staying together with people living with HIV, because the very reason why I turned to be an HIV doctor was because I recognized stigma as the reason why I wanted to be a doctor in this field. Okay, and now it's so difficult to me to make people, junior doctor, understand why HIV is still such an incredible disease, so different from all the other, and make them not feel that it is the same as hypertension or diabetes, because still stigma is still there, and we still need to fight about that. And so intergenerational dialogue, in order to fight at an institutional level, at an interpersonal level, but also fight the self-stigma of aging that still exists. And so it's so important that we build this dialogue. And just to end, the issue that before you quoted the idea that this must be done in a care that put the patient at the center. What does it mean to have a patient-centered care? It means that, as you were saying, that somebody needs to hear the voice of people living with HIV. And how can I hear the voice? Well, the voice is heard if I've got the tool to oblige the doctor to hear the voice. This is what we call the patient-reported outcomes. And so we stress so much in the AIDS guidelines. It was the first time that international guidelines put patient-reported outcomes as something that needed to be done to all people living with HIV. I need to have a few questions, a questionnaire, just to speak about sexual health. If I don't know, if I don't hear, I don't realize that this is an issue. And so the idea is that we needed to also from the community force the fact that our HIV clinic include patient-reported outcomes in the way in which we take care, because this is the voice of people that will bring up what are the unmet needs of people living with HIV.
Absolutely. Marc.
Yeah, I'll make it really quick. It's about the stigma conversation, and I'm not diminishing stigma by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to flip it on its head a little bit. And there are some amazing things about growing older and growing older with HIV, particularly for those of us who might have been diagnosed, for a relatively long time. We have developed resilience. We have developed survival skills. We understand the healthcare system. Some of us have got really good peer networks. And I think, Maurice said really clearly, speak to our doctors. And I think those of us that have agency should be speaking to our doctors. We should be speaking out. If I see another stigma narrative, a campaign, which is it's the worst thing in the world and all the reactions I'm going to get are really depressing, you're just reinforcing that message. So what we need to be saying is our lives are valuable, they're beautiful. We should celebrate this. I know hitting 54, 55, I'm really privileged and lucky and grateful to be alive. What do I do with that? I celebrate it and I share it. Because if I share it, other people will look and go, I can do that too.
We all must.
Wonderful.
Can I just add to what Marc has said? For every one of for every person that speaks out, it makes it easier for the next one. And the more of us that speak out, the more visual we become.
Absolutely. I agree with you, absolutely. And Joe, have you got something to add very quickly about some data around cognitive decline?
Oh, Stas. Basically, it's the scariest thing if you are going to lose your mind. You know, cognitive impairment is as scary as it gets. But recent data look at a piece done by Sam Nightingale, published 2022 in The Lancet, which basically talks about the false positive rate, because it's historic, which goes to what we've been saying about the original medications. And it's a 26% false positive rate minimum. And Frascati said between 35% and 84% prevalence, but looking down towards the 35%. And I just think that's such good news, you know. Keeping in mind is like great.
Fantastic. And we are pretty much out of time. I'm going to have one quick fire question to all of you to answer really quickly, so that someone actually posed to me. What's your top tip for aging well and living well with HIV? Starting with you, Maurice, and we'll go around.
Everything that's been said today: exercise, engaging with people, being creative, and of course nutrition and sleep.
Fantastic. Marc?
People always ask me why I look like I do at my age. I always say because I'm a good person. So just put good in the world. Put good in the world.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Joe?
I completely agree with Marc. I would add to it a sense of humour.
Judy?
And to all of that, I'd add connections. Just make sure you stay connected.
Yeah.
And thank you. And Giovanni?
And so I most of all would like to thank all the hundreds and hundreds of people I've met living with HIV, because really, please make your voice be heard, because this helps us to learn about how to give value to life. This is something that all of us need, but actually all your experience is something that enrich us so much. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And we really are out of time. That has been absolutely fantastic. You are all absolutely brilliant. So thank you all, beautiful panel, for coming on. Thank you to everyone who's got their questions over. Thank you to Disruptive Live for their technical wizardry and making this all happen. And the next aidsmapLIVE will be a World AIDS Day special, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.